What does the three words fry, cry, die mean to you?
Well, I worked kind of closely with a sports psychologist when I was going down to do my radiation. And I went in and I sat with this counselor who said, you've got a great attitude. And I said, that's the problem. I need an incredible attitude because right now I'm fighting for my life. I want to make sure that I win this game.
Brett, I'm excited to talk to you. In my hands, I'm holding your book. I'm thrilled. Redefining Success, Still Making Mistakes. I've started reading it. It's a great book. So, Brett, briefly tell us how did you define success in the past, and how are you redefining success now?
It's a great question. Sort of, as you know, the essence of the book. Originally, like many people in a wealth-obsessed world, I got involved with the investment banking community and finance and oil and gas. And the definition of success would have been pretty singular in the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of power, the pursuit of deals, and all the material trappings in a wealth-obsessed world. The evolution of my views on success is obviously towards happiness, and I genuinely believe that definitions of success can and should be multifaceted in the sense that there's nothing wrong with, Western capitalist society to be pursuing some of the material goods that come with hard work. But the flip side is, if you don't respect and recognize some of the collateral damage that occurs if you only focus on wealth, in other words, you don't look after your health, you don't look after your family, you don't look after your friends, it's pretty hard to say that you've had a happy life. You might have lived 80 years, 1 year at a time, but it's hard to call that a life.
And speaking about health, I'll ask you some questions in that area. But let me briefly ask you to tell the stories of your mom swimming for charity and the particular drive that you had and your dad had. And what did these stories actually mean to you, and what do you hope the readers learn from it?
Well, there's stories of just small town people living small town values. And in the case of my mother, who unfortunately was a cigarette smoker and not particularly fit in the later parts of her years, she went in a swim-a-thon for my sisters and I in our swim club, and people assumed that she would swim 1 or 2 lengths, but she swam backstroke, elementary backstroke, with a life jacket on, and managed to swim 40 lengths and out fundraised pretty well anybody in the city by a factor of 5. So. She had a lot of friends giving her $1 a lap, never expecting that $40 was possible. So it was a big thing at the time. It was more the creativity and the entertainment value that came with that. And then the other story that you talk about in terms of Dad and I being out in the country one time, we drove through a crossing in a rural area, and both roads were in terrible shape. But we drove through the crossing, and then in the rearview mirror, my dad noticed a family friend, a neighbor, who had driven the opposite direction down, or in perpendicular to us, down a really muddy road. And Dad knew that this woman, who was a widow, might run into trouble. And I just remember him struggling to back up through the mud so that we could follow her in case she got in trouble. It was just, and that was the sort of thing that my dad did. And I call him a prairie gentleman. It's just call it the right thing to do, and not all was done.
And that left you an endearing impression that, hey, you still remember to these days.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it really speaks volumes in the context of parenting, to remember that the things you do when your children are around are things that those children may remember for the rest of their lives.
Right. So when you put the word mistakes in the book title, you really mean it. You have shared some serious and harsh mistakes you've made in life, and in particular, one story about an art auction and your young daughter really brought tears to my eyes. So can you briefly tell that story, and how did that change you actually forever?
Sure. Well, sort of two things. Well, first of all, I'll address the fact that the title includes the word "still making mistakes." When I first went to Penguin, we sat down, we were exploring the name of the book. And for 3 years now, as I've been playing around with the book concept, the book has been called Redefining Success. And it used to be Redefining Success in a Wealth-Obsessed World. I was trying to drive home that point, but we simplified it to Redefining Success. And then the second part, we had a conversation with the publisher saying, would you consider making the title of the book still making mistakes. And I kind of smiled and said, my life's not that screwed up that it has to be the headline. It can still be the subtitle. So we had some fun with that, but that's where it landed. Now, the story you talk about certainly is one that is memorable and emotional for me, and given that it's in the book, I'll just highlight it. But there was an occasion where I was looking after the kids, and I called it babysitting, which in itself is pathetic. It was parenting, but my concept was babysitting at the time. And I was trying to bid on some art at an art auction, and they called the house apparently, and I didn't get the calls. And I finally phoned the auction house and said, hey, what's going on? What's going on with this particular piece? And they said, we sold it about 20 minutes ago, but we called you, and a little girl said that you weren't home. And I, in almost a rage, said to the little girl, after chewing her out for making that mistake, bottom line was, how the hell could you tell someone I'm not home? And she looked up at me with these big brown eyes and said, because you never are. And that was really the beginning of repurposing and rethinking and then repurposing my approach to my priorities, and in particular, my own definition of success.
Has your daughter read this part of the book yet? And would you mind sharing her reaction?
She's aware of the story, and she's totally comfortable that it's in there. She's actually in South America right now. I was down to visit her a little while ago, and she's very aware that the story is in the book.
Okay. So you wrote very frankly about your prostate cancer journey, including all the challenging, painful, and sometimes embarrassing times. Can you briefly talk about that journey? And have you ever thought of leaving some of them out, because some of them are quite painful?
You know, the story in itself is the journey in itself is the complete story, and so it strikes me that I want to inspire men in particular to make sure that they get prostate cancer screened or tested early, because it's a great cancer to get if you catch it early. It's a terrible cancer to have if you catch it late. And I actually caught it late, so I had a lot of work to do. And so while some of the messaging and some of the stories are quite graphic and maybe to some a little bit disturbing, if you're not aware of the consequences, if you're not aware of how challenging the process can be, you don't sometimes take it seriously.
What does the 3 words fry, cry, die mean to you?
Well, I worked kind of closely with a sports psychologist when I was going down to do my radiation, and some people said, well, what's the relevance of a sports psychologist? Well, if you think of the game of life, and you think of life as a bit of a game, and you use the analogy that cancer is a battle or an opponent, I wanted to have all the mental toughness that you could possibly have. And I went in and I sat with this counselor who said, you know, you've got a great attitude. And I said, that's the problem. I need an incredible attitude, because right now I'm fighting for my life. I want to make sure that I win this game. And as part of it, I developed a mantra when I was in the radiation equipment, where I would visualize that the radiation was actually causing, the radiation that was coming in was hitting the cancer cells and driving it to cry and fry and die. And that was, or the fry, cry, and die, whatever order, doesn't matter. But I visualized it, and you know, whether it helped or not, I'm here today.
Yeah, totally. So, briefly tell us about the movies, Rudy and Saving Grace. You watched them a lot, apparently. What does that mean to you?
Some nights I saw them both. Some nights it was one at a time. But you know, one of the things my coach did, my sports psychologist coach, said to me was, you need to surround yourself with the genres of inspiration and humor. And in both cases, both movies have an element of both. Although Saving Grace is an offbeat British humor, and I love British humor, and this is a very offbeat. It's about a woman whose husband dies, and she has to take on looking after his estate, only to find out that her ex-husband had a lover, and the estate was bankrupt. So now she had to make a living, and she discovers that growing marijuana might be a short-term solution. So it's absolutely hilarious as this show unfolds, and I quite enjoyed it. And then the other, of course, is Rudy, which I don't think there's anyone in the sports world who hasn't seen it or shouldn't have seen it. And it's an empowering story of a kid who, against the odds, finds his way onto a team that didn't want him, didn't need him, and and didn't respect him in the early days. And ultimately, he was, if not the only, he was the last person ever carried out on the shoulders of his fellow players when he played his last game. So a true hero, a true legend, and a true story of inspiration. And that was pretty empowering. So I thought, I can watch this again, and I just kept watching it.
I saw Rudy the first time this year, and I really liked it. So you talked about having fabulous influence in your life. Can you briefly talk about how the likes of Dick Haskin and the Shaw and the Riddell families influence you? Very briefly.
There's 3 or 4 families. Well, I shouldn't say 3 or 4. Those are just 3 or 4 of the many families that I look to as role models, who were people who had made wealth, had influence and power, but at the same time greatly respected the value of community, and the fact that just riding on Earth for them would be a waste of the journey, but they had a chance to influence how big the bus was and where the bus was going. And so I have great respect for the company, or the families that I named in the book, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So philanthropy is one of your priorities in life now, and I have the pleasure of attending some of your annual charity garden parties at your home in the last few years. Can you briefly talk about the origins of the garden party and maybe 1 or 2 of the charities, plus the concept of a meaningful check?
Well, the garden party really started out with a friend and I, who were both July 1st babies. We started out having a July 1st babies party, and there was the 2 of us, and we always ran it towards the end of June. And after a couple of years, this friend of mine got married, and their schedule started to be harder to coordinate with mine, and so it evolved to just the Brett garden party. So the roots are in my birthday party, but we don't celebrate my birthday in any way, shape, or form at the event. I mean, it just happens. But what has happened is the event has taken hold, and it's become a fairly important stopping point for many people in their summer journey in terms of philanthropy and charity. And we have over 1,000 people come to my house, including staff, and we raise a lot of money. It's $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in a night, but it's always for a different cause. And I'm generally looking to support causes that are off the radar screen or not yet something that people want to talk about. So things that are a little harder to raise for. And the format of the parties I run, and as well as the guys I used to work with at First Energy, is I'll pay for the party if you'll write the check. So as a result, there's 100 cents on the dollar out of the money raised actually goes to the charity. And the model seems to work. People seem to respect that I'm looking to raise money for a cause, and raise awareness is the most important thing I can do, raising money being secondary, but both seem to happen.
Yeah, and the check is a meaningful check. Yeah, even for guys like me.
I like the check to be meaningful. In some years I write, whatever's meaningful to you plus $1, or sometimes I'll say whatever's meaningful to you. If you want it to be meaningful to me, just double it. And the real point there isn't that I'm being ungrateful for what they're offering. The real point is that meaningful can always be more.
Yeah, to us individually, not to you. I mean, like you are well-to-do and meaningful to you. It's something I can't afford. But I think meaningful to each of us, we can all do our part. I think, like you mentioned in the book, one of your daughter's friend, $20 means it's meaningful to her, and you appreciate it.
Yeah, when she came back with the second 20, I got emotional then.
Mm-hmm, right. So you talked about five of your best Dragon Dance deal in the book. Can you talk about 1 or 2 of them and what makes them great?
Sure. There's several that are obviously of interest to me, but one is my jewelry business that I partnered with Rachel Milky. It was actually the first deal I ever did in the Den, and we've gone from, as she shared on the TV screen, that she did $65,000 in sales the year before I invested, and this year we're approaching $2 million. So she's a great partner. She's been great to work with. Accountability, creativity, imagination. We've done some cool things together, and I really enjoy that. Another one is a Saskatchewan-based company out of Saskatoon, which is the 320 group. There was 3 of them, now there's 2 of them, but the bottom line is the 320 comes from the fact that the square footage of a commercial shipping container is 320 square feet, 8 by 30. And pardon me, 8 by 40. The essence of that business is repurposing shipping containers to become northern or remote housing for mining camps and mining offices. And that business has literally exploded as well. We went from $500,000 in sales in the year that they approached me, and the year ahead looks like it'll be 12 to 15 million. So another business that's going very, very well.
Yeah. And of all the Dragon's Den deal that you have done, like, is there one that isn't maybe doing quite well right now, but in the long term it could be a big, really big deal?
Well, one of the businesses that struggled, was struggling with margins, was Marissa McDowsney and the Moxie boots, or pink work boots was the business. And we had sales explode, but the cost of inventory, the cost of returns, and the margins shrunk as our sales went up. So it actually was working against us. So we restructured the business dramatically, moved it to a royalty structure with a third-party constructor and distributor, and I think I'll get all my money back. It's going to take a few years, but we struggled. So, but again, you back the right person, and they have the vision and the tenacity and the desire to make it work.
How about bands Uno and DTV?
Well, that's a great question. Uno itself has ended up being moved almost to the back burner, or into the history of scientific experiments. What we found was that it was really difficult to place that product on the streets. It was too big for the sidewalks, too small for the streets. At speed, it wasn't sufficiently stable. So we kind of refocused. But again, investing in the person, we ended up with the DTV shredder. And the DTV shredder is basically a highly motorized, call it a skateboard, wakeboard platform with treadmills, and it runs in arid climates, so you can run it across desert, and runs across snow, and it'll run across rocks, so you can take it almost anywhere, and it's a pretty cool device. So it's hip and it's cool, but the interesting thing is the military, all over this as a remote transportation vehicle. And so we're not disclosing numbers, but sales are just exploding on that business. So there's another one that struggled for 2 or 3 years, but again, I backed the right person.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the writing process now. So what was the most fun part for you to write, and what was the hardest part for you to write the book?
Hello?
Hello? Sorry, can you hear me? Hi, Brett, can you hear me? No?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah, there was a gap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask you
I heard the question.
You heard a question? Okay.
Yeah. The most fun part to write for me was the one that came at the very end, and it truly was chapter 10. As I put that together, my top 5 lists in terms of the things that interest me and excite me in life. The hardest parts to read or to write were, I guess, kind of regurgitating the history from almost 20 years ago of building the firm. So it wasn't difficult to write intellectually or emotionally. There was just so many stories, and trying to burn it down to the things that might be the most relevant for a reader. That was all it was. So there was nothing that was difficult to share, because the stories in the book are often coming from the talks that I've given. And the talks, if I've said it once, I can say it again. It's just a matter of writing it. So committing it to pen and ink is a bit more challenging a process than just standing up and speaking about it.
Now, I want to ask you, what do you hope as the main takeaway for these 3 groups of people? So the general readers, your friends and business partners, and most importantly, maybe your children.
Yeah, those are good questions. I've sometimes said that this book wasn't written for anyone, but each chapter was written for someone. And while someone who's not interested in business, their eyes might glaze over at chapter 8, and someone who's only interested in philanthropy might only focus on, or pardon me, chapter 7. Someone who's interested in philanthropy might only read 8 and 9 and skip over the Dragon's Den stories in 7. But most people find it a fairly straightforward read. And I've had feedback from family and friends who've loved the stories or the book, because it combines all the stories, many of which they knew, but they just hadn't always heard the feelings associated with them. My son has the book right now. My daughter is reading it, and another daughter will see it when she gets home in a couple of weeks. So I haven't had their feedback, but one of my daughter's best friends just ordered 100 copies. So I'm reasonably comfortable that the stories will unfold as they should.
But what do you hope their main takeaway are?
Well, for all of them, I mean, I want them to understand that my journey has been one of highs and lows, And the other is that there's great hope. And if you were to set your priorities at an early age around the right definition or definitions of success, I think it's a greater recipe for happiness early on. And we're not on this earth just to pile up assets. We're on this earth to enjoy the journey, and in my mind, make the journey more interesting or more enlightening or more rewarding or more comfortable for other people. And that's what I hope people will take away their own decisions as to how they want to focus their time in terms of their health, their family, their friends, and their community.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Brett, for your time.
Most enjoyable, Captain. I've always appreciated your support of the Dragons.
All right. Cool. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Take care now.
Okay. Bye-bye now.